Hello, this is Brian Whitten and ET Art. If you are 12 years old or younger, I would prefer you to go and get your mother and father to have a look at this video first, and if they say it's okay for you to watch it, well, that would be fine. For any of you who have watched my channel up to this point, I did want to start today with basically the parchment that we see before us here. It's an Egyptian parchment that was found by a Frenchman whose name I do not recall. His name is irrelevant to a degree. It is the meaning of the parchment. We've gone through certain aspects of this parchment before and discussed many facets of it and indicated that the damage, what appears to be damage, is not damage. It's actually the story of what we've been told is within the damage. Before I moved on to today's presentation, if that's what we call it, I wanted to bring to your attention basically the design of the parchment here. What we've got here is all these people seated, and we have this man here teaching. He's teaching the class, teaching the lesson. I can assure you that if you're a university lecturer and you are privy, as I would expect, there would be a greater part of the population of Earth, and I say half of us, I mean probably half of us know what I'm about to tell you today is real and true, but we do not get taught that in our universities and schools, and it is certainly withheld from a greater part of the population. When I say greater, I'm actually not so certain that's the case, and I'll show you why. As if you look at this here, where we are looking at how many people are in this box here. This is the yellow box, and this is the line of our date for the crossing of the plane of the sun. He is obtained by being here the 24th of the 12th at 3 AM. It's the only thing we get 24 of is hours in a day. And there's only 3, 4 here getting the new lesson beyond this bar. The ones beyond or backwards got their back to this classroom as the other 4. It's the population of Earth they're talking about here, of the 8 billion or so that are on the planet. These people here already know the lesson, that's the thing. They're saying there's 4 billion. Over half the population of the world know what I'm telling you is true. The other half of us are led and fed what would appear to be another concept of the truth of humans, the truth of mankind, the truth of the reptilians, and the truth of the planet and its cycle around the sun. I wanted to bring that to your attention just to say that what I'm telling you is known by a greater many people on this planet. I also want you to be aware that if you are a teacher, if you're a teacher and spreading stories that you know are not right, that you are one of these people here and you're sitting in a university still teaching the old story, I would not like to be in your seat when they get here. There is a time, the time is very quickly approaching where the judgments will be made, and your teaching of the untruths are putting you on that side of that line. And you do not want to be on that side of that line. We are looking at here 3, 4 billion, a little bit over 4 billion getting taught the new lesson here. And that side of the line, from where I'm looking, is not a good place to be. I just wanted to start with that before I went on with the rest of what I wanted to do today, and we wanted to discuss the entire cycle of planet Earth around the sun as portrayed by the pyramids and megaliths left here to tell us exactly that. Now, to this point, we have discussed the planes of the sun. That was where we left our last lesson, if it's that. And excuse me if you think that this process here is more of a lesson like me telling you how it is, but I'm just reading what's there for us and I'm relaying what the message is. I stand here in this type of environment because I find it a little bit more, well, it's a little bit more personal, I suppose, and a little bit easier to explain, with me able to have image on the screen and point directly at it and explain as we go along. So that's why I do it as well. It makes things a little bit easier for me. I've drawn this up, albeit it's rough and coarse to a degree, but it does tell the story. Imagine the sun is the yellow dot in the middle. We're looking at the planes of magnetism of the sun, looking down upon the sun, if you would. Okay, the big round circle around the outside is a rotating horizontal plane of the sun. It's very narrow, is very, very strong, and rotates in an anti-clockwise direction like so. The two wider lines that you see going across here are a depiction of the vertical planes of the sun. When I say vertical planes, I'm talking about the magnetic planes, the ones that keep the Earth where it is at the moment. And we are not on this plane. We are not on this plane. We are within a field that is controlled by these two vertical planes rotating in an anti-clockwise direction. They rotate, clockwise. These two rotate clockwise. This one rotates anti-clockwise. These are 24 million miles wide. These are depicted. I will show you where in our calculations later where that is worked out. It's not a very difficult thing to work out, and I will show you that these are approximately 24 million miles wide. The diagram I have up now is the cycles, in other words the complete cycles and movement of planet Earth around the sun. I've put the two rings of rotation, which is us here and us here, so the inner ring, which is 93 million miles, and the outer ring, which is 186 million miles to the sun. I will explain as we go along what we are told happens. We are on the inner ring now, this one here, and we're coming back up. We're also rotating anti-clockwise around the sun, so this is effectively us here. There are four unnatural cycles that move us both around on the inner plane, which is this cycle here, and move us around on the outer cycle in a process that makes the planet rotate around the sun in an opposite direction. That is one. It's done both on the inner and the outer, halfway through the time spent on each of those planes, or on each of those rings of rotation, right? So it's changed halfway through the real time that we spend on the inner and outer ring of rotation. The other cycles are one here, in the process of moving out to the outer ring, and the other cycles are the ones that move us back in here from the outer ring back to the inner ring. I want to go through the whole process here of what happens with X being the one that we have just finished. It's taken 6,000 years to cycle, or to complete this cycle. We are almost at the plane where we come into the plane of the sun. It's very narrow, very strong, rotates our planet much quicker than what it is at the moment. And when I'm saying rotated, I'm talking about the rotational spin of Earth on its axis. In actual fact, increases our rotational speed to the point we only have 16 hours a day instead of 24. That is a very quick and instant thing if allowed to happen naturally. The rotation speed increases something in the order of 16,000 miles an hour. We've calculated that, and we've shown you in previous videos how that came about. I do not want to go back there just at this point. I want to talk about the motion of the planet around the sun in a full sequence. So that is what happens here. The other motion is backwards in this direction, which is giving us a 32-hour day. The process here, in both here and here, no matter which way you go, I would think that we are being told in the unnatural cycle out here, which was livable here, which is what we're having right now, and I mean now, it's only this 1,000 and but probably 1,500 years either side of this cycle, 2,000 possibly, where Earth is in actual fact livable to a degree, because the middle of that cycle is certainly no good. 3,000 years ago, I'll explain to you with one thing what happens with that, but 3,000 years ago You didn't look at the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. 3,000 years ago, spring and autumn were very similar to what we have now. But what happened in winter time, if you were in the northern hemisphere, is the sun just kept going south, and your hours of sunlight dwindled to a couple of hours a day. I think the lessons here are to teach us that going in plane with the sun in that direction, or in the plane with the sun that direction, whether it's 32 hours or whether it's 16, you are in plane with the sun, standing with the straight axis, and the problem is we either have too little light or too much light, none of which actually give you the problem you think you're going to have. What happens is we have an ice age. It doesn't matter which way you go, it just gets too cold to live on. And that is what I believe the entire lesson is here to teach us. When we get 32 hours a day, you could say, well, how can you get an ice age there? The point is the other half of the globe that is not getting sun is getting 32 hours of dark, and that is where it is the air temperature of the Earth that drives our system here, not CO2. If we then turn around and say we rotate this way and we get 16 hours a day, once again, the Earth does not get enough chance on one half to warm up, and then the other half is in cold again very quickly, and therefore we get the same problem. So I think the lesson here is purely and simply letting us know there is no Goldilocks zone as such. The only part you get of Goldilocks zone is that cycle there. That is one instance I wanted to talk to you about. The other one is that when we run that same cycle here, the speed difference, which is why I started with the other planes to show you the plane of the sun, is what we're seeing as 10 hour and 8 hours a day, whether we go clockwise or anti-clockwise in the outer ring. Albeit this diagram too is a bit crude, but sometimes simple diagrams are far more easy for people to understand. Imagine us 6,000 years ago coming around in this direction. So the line with the arrows on is closest to us in respect to revolution. The line at the back is the one the other side of the sun. If we're travelling in this direction, so we're going around the sun clockwise, and we go around like this, and here is where we get hit by our comets to put us off the plane of the sun. Imagine that that is the plane of the sun. We're looking at it like this. What happens is the planet then, or the plane of travel, in other words the black ring, which is Earth's plane of travel, starts to move like this. Okay? And what happens, and I've had people say to me, Brian, we travel through the plane of the sun twice every year. I said, that's exactly right. We're travelling through the plane of the sun at 33,000 miles an hour, and it's a little over 200 kilometres wide. We travel through it. That's exactly right. What happens when it goes like this, and the plane moves around 180 degrees, we are no longer travelling through the plane, we are travelling adjacent to it and within it, and that is where it happens, and you cannot travel further than 180 degrees. The plane cannot travel beyond it, because what happens is once you've drifted off and it's wandered around like this. 3,000 years ago, this was how our planet revolved around the sun. It was not going east-west, it was going off to the south, and I'll see you later for 3 months if you're in the northern hemisphere. And if you're in the northern hemisphere during summer, the sun didn't go away, it went down to a dusk and back up. It was very, very, very hot. I will show you a megalith shortly that will explain that process. So once again, if you understand what I'm saying here, once the plane of the planet's movement off the plane of the sun, it is traversing the plane too quickly to be caught, and it traverses right around, does its 180 degrees, takes 6,000 years, and then when it comes up here, it is not cutting across the plane, it is travelling within it. And the plane, like I said, is 200 kilometres wide. The traverse and movement here is roughly 67.6 kilometres. We've worked that out prior. It's not difficult to work out. That is what happens, and that's why we can't go beyond the 6,000 year mark in that cycle, and that's what they do to achieve that. And then once I've said that, once you've rotated around, you're actually physically coming back this way. So that's how they change on the inner and outer ring, the rotation of direction around the sun. It's that cycle that does that. Now I'll show you what megalith it is that displays that too. I have shown you this megalith before in another video. It's in Saudi Arabia. It is looking south. It is showing us here the amount of hours in a day in the middle of winter. So as the sun has got overhead and it's travelled further south, it does not stop. It just keeps going to the point it disappears altogether, and you're getting 2 hours of sunlight a day. That's the worst case scenario, right where that megalith is standing, right there in Saudi Arabia. And that is reason why. The reason they do this and put the megalith here is to let us know exactly what happens. So in other words, what happens is it goes away. The worst case scenario is your 2 and 4 hours, 6, 8, 10. Then you've got 12 hours of sunlight where it goes and doesn't disappear, where you're seeing dusk here. And this is what happens. You do not get any time during the summer period where the sun disappears. It just stays there the whole time. Once again, a lesson I believe we are possibly seeing in travelling in the line, the very narrow line, horizontal magnetism of the sun is not only very, very strong enough to control the planet, but it must be concentrated UV and all such things. It's probably why we're having the weather we have at the moment. But that is what I wanted to show you as a megalith there that points that out. So that cycle that we've just discussed is a cycle both on the inner ring and the outer ring that changes the rotation around the sun. So in other words, clockwise or anti-clockwise. Now what I'd like to do is show you this cycle here and this one here. The cycle that moves us from the inner ring to the outer ring is one where the Earth is laid flat. Okay, so in other words, it doesn't spiral out with an axis of 24 degrees or whatever. It in actual fact gets laid flat on its axis like this. The sun still revolves around, the Earth still revolves around the sun, but what happens is the plane of travel it's on slowly expands so that in 6,000 years it's out here beyond Mars, 40 million miles beyond Mars. It is in this process here that we are habitating already, I would expect, Mars, and I can't see us on the planet here for a very good reason. I'll show you why. This one here, we have an inclined axis like so and like so. In the middle here, I can tell you now, that wouldn't be very good to live on, because the amount of area on the Earth's surface is very, very narrow here. So I would expect our lesson here of the cycles of each civilization, it can't be more than a couple of thousand years, to be honest. That's what I actually think. I think a lot of what we're seeing here in the megaliths and things we get taught about other civilizations that lived here prior, fictitious history as such. Mars, on the other hand, rotates where it is at 24 hours in a day, and it is already in plane with the sun, rotating anti-clockwise around the sun like this, which is why I've left that there. I've taken all the other planets out just to keep us with Earth, inner ring, Earth's outer ring of rotation, and Mars. So Mars is already travelling at 24 hours a day in rotational speed. It travels at 53,000 miles an hour through space, in other words, how fast the body of the planet moves. And that's a very interesting thing. Like I said, I'm not a planetary scientist, but the fact that it actually rotates slower on plane with the sun than Earth makes me understand that there may be things within Mars that we need to be in Mars, and that's effectively what they're telling us here, that we see that there are previous talk of previous civilizations on Mars, and it would be us. What I wanted also to make mention is when we are pushed out here to the outer ring, we are laid flat, as I said, but with a flat axis, what I wanted to discuss was that the wobble or precession of the planet as such, it still has a wobble placed on it, that as it moves out through to the ring beyond Mars, that wobble is increasing. And that is what's going on as it moves from the inner ring to the outer ring. So when we look at both these motions here of the planet, when it's moved beyond Mars on this one, where you see this getting wider and wider, it's actually the pole that's going out towards the line beyond Mars that's getting the larger deviation here as the further it goes out. And on this one it's the opposite. When it's pushed back in, it is the preceding pole, or the pole that's pointing still towards Mars, that is moving like this. So when it's moving outwards like this, it is the pole that's going out that's getting the variation. And here, when it's pushed back in, it's the pole that's behind that's getting the variation. That's what I believe we can attain by seeing that there. And I have mentioned before that when we get past here, this 10-day here is what I wanted to go on with now, because as much as I've just told you that the full cycle is 111,000 years, it's actually incorrect, and I'll tell you why. Now, I brought this back up again. I have showed you this before. When I got to the understanding of there being two rings of rotation, and I'd put a video up saying I have no way of knowing what they were, how long, because I didn't know how fast the Earth was going to be rotating in one direction or the other. I knew what was happening, and I could see that written into the megaliths, but nowhere could I decipher exactly how many years it was going to actually take. And this got written in the sky the very next day I uploaded the video. This is written in the sky the day after, and got put on a YouTube channel, which I'm quite able to put up here because it was the actual fact just shared from somebody who'd taken it with camera. And like I said, it was on the other side of the Earth. I don't know where it was, but I immediately froze the frame yet again and knew straight away what it was, and it was referring to the inner and outer rings. And I've shown you before that there is a golden plate that represents the horizontal plane of the sun, that I've shown in my other videos, that have these same symbols on. They are clockwise and anti-clockwise rotations of the planet. What I wanted to do here is show you these numbers, and I've said to you already in the video that the completed cycle is 111,000 years. But it's actually not. It was actually why you get told that is that in actual fact the inner ring here, it said was 34,435. I got that from this count here, 34,435. And the other way it was 53,443 years. It was letting me know how long I thought the cycle was. But in actual fact it isn't really how long the cycle is, because what we're talking about when we're talking about these numbers here are reflective of days, not years. That's why it tells you this, so you know when it says 53,443 years here, that is actually incorrect. It's days, and that's where I said to you in the outer ring we're getting 8-hour and 10-hour days, which is why you see that number so high. I'll show you one other thing. If we go back now to the Tirumali complex in India, once again I'll bring, this was Praveen Mohan had in actual fact had this images sent to him and said, why don't you go and have a look at this? And I have contacted Praveen. I'm not saying he agrees with my understanding of the video or my understanding of the UFO stuck in a wall, but what I'm seeing here, the fact that it is in a wall, would mean to me that the time that it takes to go from here to here is the same as it takes to go from here to here. that it's why it's on a wall. It's like a clock face, and it's saying, well, the time to go from there to there is the time to go from there to there. And that's why I'm suggesting to you that in actual fact our sequence that we've calculated at 111,000 based on those figures is not actually correct. It is only purely and simply there to work out the 8 and 10 hour days. And what I would see now is that what we've got is 16,000 year cycles in here. One maybe being a little bit longer, right? Though I would expect that's probably a little bit longer. So you could say 15 and 16,000 years. I'll just leave it at 16 and say 32 on the inner ring, 32 on the outer ring, which is 64, and then 4 cycles of 6,000, which brings us up to 88. Okay, so the real cycle in years, as long as we have on an unnatural cycle that we're on now, is 88,000 years, and that is where I see us getting told that that's exactly that this is on the wall for a reason, stuck up on the wall, because the time here is reflective of the time. So in other words, it's exactly the same. It's just here, out in the outer ring, both one way or the other, it's doing 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day. And like I said, there's one here, this is 8 hour a day one. I'm not so sure there are even anybody living on the planet here at all, this one. I sort of see that that's possibly not the case. They may do they do the cycle out here to go the opposite direction. It's possible there's people on the planet again here, I don't know about here. Like I said, there's a lot I'm still unsure of. I think it would be extremely difficult to live on a planet with only 5 hours of light, and that far beyond Mars. I cannot see us living here, and I would see us living on Mars. I have had another image where that looks blue here. That line, it looks black on this picture, but on another one it actually looks blue. So it's a little bit difficult for me to see what that is, but I certainly would expect that we live on Mars for certain periods of time here, and that Earth is certainly not livable there at 8 hours a day, going 55,000 or 66,000 miles an hour through space. So that's what I wanted to show you. So from there I'll go back to our original picture. So if I now show you what we've just seen, these cycles when we come back in here are the ones where it is laid flat and flipped over. I would expect the difference from 2,000 to 3,000 years be relative to the cycle that I've just shown you. That one is 10 hours when it comes off, the other's 8 hours, and maybe when it's been let come in here that it actually slows on its own, and that might be why we're getting shown that again. We certainly do not come in here without further assistance. This one appears to have one event there, and the expanding plane lying with the flat axis moves us out. It does not move back in here, whether it be stood up or laying flat. That is what the lesson is there on the multiple impacts, that would appear to take place every 1,000 years. And they seem to be doing, like I said, telling us there's multiple rings of rotation. I think that the reason why we get shown that is that the moon is made rotate around the sun when we get into this plane now. When we come into this plane, I'm absolutely certain what we're getting told is we get tsunamis daily, driven by the rising sun. The sun is that strong, it sucks the water over to the other side of the planet, so that when we get to sunrise here, the water's coming back as a tsunami with the rising sun. And that is why the moon is placed in between the sun and the earth, and why we are shown on the other image the multiple places they stop Earth on the way in. It's because it can be done. Before I go back to the other cycle, or diagram of the cycles, I wanted to just quickly discuss the eastern Mastaba fields, and I have another diagram that I have put up that was the western Mastaba fields, and that they in actual fact are a record of the movement of the axis from 10 degrees to 24 degrees, and that it took 300 years, and that was also depicted in the Serapeum, with the boxes in the hall depicting movement in the hall, and the boxes all being represented in 500 years each, which is why we have 12 out at the end of the hall in the Serapeum that donate, or depict I should say, the 6,000 years with a steady axis of 24 degrees. And this was the movement getting recorded, and it took 300 years for that to happen. I want you to keep that in mind when we go back now and look at this diagram. Now if I come back to the cycle diagram and say, okay, in this cycle here, when we're pushed off the plane, the horizontal plane, we are now within the fields of the rotating vertical planes, and I'm believing what we're seeing here is that is in actual fact what retains our position here. It is the mass of the planet and the rotating vertical planes that expand our angle of axis, I should say. They expand our angle of axis from the 10 degrees that we see depicted in the eastern and western Mastaba fields, and the way they've recorded the equinox movement, that they're in actual fact telling us it's the mass of the planet, the rotational speed, and the rotating vertical planes of the sun that retain our position at 24 degrees. It actually gets to that point, and that is where its limit is, because of the fields, because of the strength of the fields, and because of the speed of their rotation. That's what I wanted to point out there. I don't make point here, what's going to happen down here in this field here? We are told here that we have got 10 and 8 hours, whether we're going this way or this way on this outer ring. What happens here? What they're telling us there is if they perform the same function here as they do here, this does not work. The high-speed rotation off the plane of the horizontal plane is that fast, with the rotating vertical planes moving so quick through space, that it's impossible to have here a situation where your axis is going to be 24 degrees. The rotational speed will bring it up straight here. That's exactly what we're getting told here, that even on the inner ring, on the horizontal band, we are actually being accelerated to the point our axis stands up straight. So in this cycle here, it's impossible also to have a 24 degree tilt on the axis. I would also suspect that where we looked at the cave indication on the cave wall, is that when we are seeing this wobble go out, it could in actual fact be saying that the wobble gets so much, so that by the time it's out there, it's actually like that when it gets stood up, and that when we're moving out here to the outer ring and we're seeing the one pole move like this, it may be that they might be telling us it moves the entire planet itself, so that in actual fact when the time it comes out here, instead of it coming out and being stood up this way, it's actually already in a position in line like that. And that's what I think that cave picture is also saying, that whilst it's moving out here, that movement is so radical by the time it gets beyond out here, that in actual fact it ends up being straight like this. It's possible, that's what I'm saying. I would think that looking at the straight edge at the end, at the end of it, that may be what it's saying. I don't know. Like I said, there's a couple of things I'm unsure of, but I'm certainly without doubt saying that it's impossible there for us to retain the same axis tilt as we have in here. The high-speed rotation of the vertical planes going through here real quick, in actual fact would rotate the planet that quick, it would just stand straight up, just as it does here when it hits the plane going that way. So I'll be honest, when you're in these cycles here moving out, you're in actual fact got the very centre of this cycle here is the entire cycle, which is almost unlivable. There's a very small part of the Earth where you're getting 12 hours of dark and 12 hours of light. To me, there is very little of the entire cycle that we actually could live on. It is only here through management that we can live in this area. This one here, we've got 2,000 years at the start and 2,000 years at the end that's pretty reasonable. But certainly beyond out here, and these ones are going out, like I said, it's the very centre of that there that is here, so that would mean you would be living near the equator to have any sort of reasonable life. And then this one coming back in here again are all reasons and lessons in planetary motion to say that we, in actual fact, there is really no Goldilocks zone as such. It's only a couple of thousand years in this middle cycle here that's as good as what we have now. We are now, like I said, heading up to the plains, probably why we're getting very, very warm weather. And even my local river has stopped running. It's just come out of winter, so it's not looking good. Mars does have a 24-hour day, so we will probably be put back on Mars with their assistance, I would expect, not just ourselves. I could be wrong, but I do not see all the purpose of all the messages and megaliths to tell us that we are all going to pass. So that just doesn't make sense to me. I think that we're in actual fact going to take up a civilization. Those that will be worthy will be moved on, and there, like I said, there may be some that get moved away entirely. This inserted image does point towards the Taurus constellation as being where they went many, many millions of years ago. It could be where we're taking very, very regularly each time a cycle that we can exist on for a couple of thousand years seems to be what we've got here. And that's why I'm saying all the megaliths I look at that point to the very same sequence, the very same cycles, the very same numbers are there, make me think that the people that we're told lived in those places, they weren't there at all. They actually just replaced with what we saw because everything was swept away like 6,000 years ago. It would have to have been, and the people put on the planet 6,000 years ago at the beginning of our cycle would have to have been very well aware of what we are talking about. That's why we see on the Egyptian parchment a teacher on this side teaching half the class, because who started here 6,000 years ago was well aware of what was going on. We have been misled towards the end of our cycle. Whether that too is by design, I'm not 100% sure. It would certainly look to me like it was not intended that way, and that the parchment has been designed because they knew what would happen, just like the rocks, and we've discussed that before, indicate things that are happening or happened, and yet the rocks have been here. I've got one there of the church with the spire burning and falling off. It was on one of my rocks. And how can that be? I've had a rock longer than longer than that has actually happened. So that only happened not so long back. So they know what was going down, so they can see. Obviously they do have the ability to travel in time, I would expect as well. Well, that does bring me to the end of this video series now, and I have said that before, but it really is actually the last video I'm going to post for quite some time, I would expect. There's really no point pushing further when half of the world already knows what I'm trying to tell you, and they are very busy making sure nobody gets to know. So, like I said, there's not much more I can do with that. They control the media, the TV, the radio, and they certainly manipulate my social media channel. It's really easy to tell, and I've always been pretty much aware of that as well. They've been on my media, or at least on my internet monitoring for many, many, many years, totally another realm, I guess, and that was my attempts to report corruption. I had hoped and could think that, yeah, okay, well look, I could go with the ET art and the imagery on the rocks, but that would be exactly the same thing. It would be manipulated, stopped, and it would be a total waste of time, which is why I didn't actually publish my book. I just put it up free. I know that there are images within the book, as there are in my videos, that are, I mentioned already in the video that they are, copyrighted, but I'm not making any money here, and there was never real intent to make any money here. I only really approached the federal government to assess the rocks in the rivers up and down the east coast of Australia. I also was more than willing to teach people how to do it, and I uploaded a video to let others know how to do it as well, although I would expect that too, even if anybody else found it, would be just as heavily manipulated as my channel. I do live in a world where I have to go and make my way, so therefore I have to do that. I have to go and make sure other things are okay, and the two things I have to worry about at this point in time are my two boys, so they're going to get the priority now. I have to go and make sure both of them are okay, and I had hoped to help one of my sons follow in what I was doing, but he too is, like I said, I said to him the other day, you'll find that people are placed in jobs when they're on the other side of the line. It's not necessarily that you haven't got the ability, it's just that you're not willing to take part in their lecherous ways, so to speak. There is a lesson to be served here, that is obvious in the parchment, and a lesson to be taught. Who does the teaching, I do not know. I would expect it was our ancestors and ones that told the people that we're here to guide us with loyalty and understanding and the truth, and they have bent it every which way and have given us a totally untruthful history, and they have not helped with the development of mankind in a proper manner. Rather, they have sought their own wealth and possessions and made it to a situation now where even education itself is something that is indebting children to people that print money on a machine. That's really what happens here. So listen, I will finish up today, and it's been a little bit, I don't know, daunting in one respect, but certainly there is an invaluable amount of information that I've learnt personally myself, and it's invaluable, it's priceless, you would say. So therefore I may not have made any money, but the experience and understanding of what is around me is priceless, so I go away with that. And there may be one or two people on my channel and social media channels that are actually real people. A lot of them I would expect are just false accounts, or people that are certainly on the other side of the fence and making me think that I'm getting somewhere when I'm getting absolutely nowhere. I have no intention of kicking the ball along the road any further. I did ask for a new job when I looked up, and that was solve what it was that I had to solve. I think I've done that, maybe not perfectly, certainly not the first time, but there was a lot to learn, and it was a very, very, a very steep learning curve, so to speak. I am still unsure about a few things. The one thing I am sure about is that one of my images, that was the cycle of the planet image, was actually off my disc this morning. The disc that I had it on to do the presentation yesterday was gone this morning, so if you didn't do it out there in your world of manipulation of my media, somebody else did. It was probably the same people that did the little white line on my rock. And I say that because in actual fact what I had up yesterday and was burning to put up today was in actual fact incorrect. So it was actually, I watched the video before I uploaded it this morning, thought, oh, that's wrong, I'll go back and do it. I went to the disc to find that the actual image itself was gone. So maybe they too let me know it was wrong, Brian, you needed to get it right. So that's why I went back, and you'll see a little switch, cut and paste here and there into some of the videos that I've just shown you today. So like I said, that is all from Brian Whitten and ET Art for quite a few months. I would expect. I've got two boys I've got to go and look after, and they are most important. Okay, so I'm going to cut and run. I've enjoyed the help I've got from people that are genuine out there. I would expect the channel I've got, the very moment it actually gets to a point of making profit, it will be shut down. So if you're interested in any of the things that I put up, I strongly suggest you download the videos, because I'm not putting in a position here to make money out of that. Okay, that isn't what I set out to do, and it wouldn't have eventuated anyway, because in the end you find out that it's all going to come here anyway, and it may be a totally different situation than what we are used to. But yeah, like I said, that is all from me. Thank you very much. This is Brian Whitten and ET Art. Have a nice day.